9 o'clock, and I'm going to ask if we stand for invocation and pledge of allegiance. May we bow in an attitude of prayer. Most gracious Heavenly Father, we say thank you for the night of rest and for this opportunity to be of service to our community today. Lord, lead, guide, and direct us. May we honor you and please you in the things we do and say. And in this time of giving, the Christmas season, Lord, just direct our hearts to be especially aware of those in need around us, and Lord, be kind, considerate, and giving. Direct us and guide us throughout this day, I pray in thy name. Amen. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll officially call our meeting to order this morning. With that, looking for a motion to approve the minutes of November the 19th.
Motion to approve November 19th minutes.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you very much. With that, we'll move right into commissioners' reports and comments. Randy, you want to go first?
Sure. Good morning. This is always a busy week, especially coming into the holidays and Christmas. The county was able to attend Salvation Army bell ringing at the Valley Mall. That was a fun experience. I also got to go to PIA, Pittsburgh Institute of Aviation, for a groundbreaking ceremony. I think it's a 10,000-foot addition they're adding to their building. They have an abundance of students to get in. I think this month's graduation class is 29, maybe, and pretty much all of them have jobs already. So it's a great school, and they just run a real nice program there. Saturday was opening day at HCC for girls volleyball. Huge attendance, 300-400 people. And I wanted to thank HCC for hosting it, for our staff, Parks and Rec, for putting that. That was a big deal. There, I don't know how many teams were there, maybe 15 or so. And so that was a real nice, and I guess that's the reason why we had 3 state champions in volleyball this year in high school. I want to congratulate them. We gave them a proclamation. It was Williamsport, North High, and give me the other one.
Boonesboro and Williamsport.
Boonesboro, yeah. Last night was a Toys for Tot at Antietam Brewery, sponsored by the AFL-CIO Labor Council. That was a nice event too, so was able to go there. And attended the Land Use Council, and I want to thank staff for always a monthly meeting at Land Use for showing up there and answering questions. Jill and her team and Greg for their team coming in and answering questions to the local home builders and land use people, anybody that deals with our offices, and just to express their concerns or kudos. We'll take both. So anyway, that's all I have.
Okay. Mr. Kiefer, you want to go next?
I'll pass today, Commissioner Board.
Okay. Commissioner Harvey?
Yeah, I agree with everything Randy just said. Lots of stuff going on. My only comment today is I'd like to recognize the passing of Michael Schwartz, a city council member in Smithsburg, a fixture in the Smithsburg community, a veteran of the 82nd Airborne, American Legion member. I got to know him very well from his involvement in Little Sluggers, which is the youth baseball league in Smithsburg. And he got elected to the town council this past year, and he's been a contributing member of our community. He passed away far too soon. He was 52 years old. He had years of debilitating illness that he'd worked through with great spirit, a real kind and outgoing, and very interesting man who contributed to our community. It'll be a big loss. So, I feel for the family and also for our community that lost a stellar citizen. So, thank you, Mike Schwartz. We're going to miss you.
Thank you. Mr. Klein?
Good morning, everyone. Busy week or so. I do want to congratulate Georgine Georgine Charles for another successful Antietam Illumination Luminary event down Antietam Battlefield. It was the 34th Luminary. Honorary Chairman Congressman Goodloe Bartlett was in attendance. Tom Clemens was the guest speaker, hosted by our own Tom Reifert. Tom Reifert and Georgine boasted as the largest single volunteer day in the state of Maryland for people participating and helping to make that event successful. I also attended the Parks and Rec opening volleyball ceremony Saturday, where they had 228 kids registered to play volleyball. Again, Boonesboro North and Williamsport were recognized for their state championships, and I do want to give Jamie Dick and his staff kudos, congratulations. Little it be known that rec program over the last 15 or so many years that Jamie Dick's been doing it is a feeder program for all these state volleyball championship teams in this county. As I polled each one of those 3 teams Saturday, almost half on every team had played in our rec volleyball league. So thank you to our rec department and all the things they're doing to grow these young ladies into being leaders. And then I also attended the Boonesboro Santa Claus Parade and lighting of their park, a nice little hometown event. And then I also last week attended the Tonaway Hunt Club Deer Camp. Commissioners were invited to that. That's an annual event as they share in the feast and the success of their hunt. I also attended Martha's House Day when she was recognizing her volunteers. That's Debbie Cohill, so they make an impact up there in that Martha's House and Interfaith Service Coalition. I also attended the Community Foundation Volunteer of the Year Award ceremony for Carla Charles. She was recognized for her work at REACH and St. John's Homeless Shelter. She was recognized as Volunteer of the Year. I also attended PIA, their groundbreaking grand opening of their new facility, a 10,000 square foot, which will double their class size. If we recall, I believe the commissioners helped them with a vote for our George Edwards Fund, around $1 million. They're making an impact on our community. PIA now has been able to enter our school system with different programs, and as Commissioner Wagner said, most of these graduates have jobs the same day or shortly after their graduation. And I was down Williamsport the other week for Port 44's opening of 2 or 3 of their businesses, or 2 Bruce Market and Sweet Notes Bakery. So congratulations to Selena and those businesses that are opening down there. And I was out at our annual turkey trot, again, the rec department, Jamie Dick and his volunteers. They had 861 people in that race on Thanksgiving Day. It reflects well upon our community and county and HCC working together to help for scholarship monies for those athletes out there. So thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Commissioner Klein. Yes, a very busy 2 weeks. Last week, I attended the 38th class of Leadership Washington County. They had Local Government Day on Friday, participated in a panel forum with that, and as an alumni of Class 2, it made me feel very old. So there's a lot of young faces in the class of 38.
You left that role.
So I'll forgive you.
Thank you very much.
Also, on last Friday evening, I attended the Feast and Frolic. It's the annual fundraiser for our Universities of Hagerstown campus. Philanthropic for scholarships for individuals attending the University of Maryland here at our local Hagerstown campus. So very fine event, annual event, and we trust that they can continue and keep that as an annual fundraiser. Before I go into the upcoming events, I just would like to say that I'll be leaving Hagerstown early tomorrow morning, attending the winter conference of MACO, Maryland Association of Counties. It is the annual winter conference is where installation of officers are done on Thursday evening at the annual banquet, which I will be joining in and becoming a board member of MACO once again. So I'm looking forward to that return opportunity to serve Washington County in a state level at MACO, Maryland Association of Counties. Also this week, the Governor's Commission on Service and Volunteerism, we have a quarterly board meeting on Thursday. So on Thursday morning, I'll be racing back to Catonsville College campus for our board meeting, and then returning to the MACO conference in Cambridge. With that, some other upcoming events. Tomorrow is Jamison Door Company grand opening. It'll be 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. Unfortunately, I'll be leaving much earlier than that to head to the Eastern Shore. University of Maryland Extension Office Strategic Planning Town Hall is tomorrow afternoon, Wednesday, December the 11th, and that's down at the Sharpsburg Pike Boonesboro address. Next item is Dementia Friend Education Session this coming Friday, the 13th at 12 p.m. That is held at the Chamber of Commerce office right there at the Professional Arts Building in downtown Hagerstown. And Boys and Girls Club Jingle and Mingle Showcase is this Friday, the 13th at 6 p.m., and that is at the Jim Diener Center, which is the facility there on Nolan Drive. And last but not least is our joint meeting with the town of Sharpsburg tonight at 6 p.m. and look forward to having a good meeting with the mayor and council of Sharpsburg. So have we missed anything? If nothing else, we'll move right into staff comments, and first up is Dawn.
Good morning, Commissioners. Dawn Marcus, County Clerk. On behalf of the Washington County Recreation and Parks Advisory Board, I am requesting a motion to appoint Dwayne Freeman to serve a first full 3-year term from December 1st of 2024 through November 30th of 2027 as the non-voting ex officio member from the Washington County Public Schools. This is not a paid board.
Motion to support.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all that I have.
Okay. Michelle Gordon, County Administrator.
Thank you. Just a few things. First, I'd like to congratulate President John Barr on his recent appointment to the board of MACO. I'm sure you'll do a wonderful job. I did participate in the Salvation Army bell ringing, as well as many of our other county department heads and employees also participated. I attended Maryland Theater Board meeting. I also attended opening day of girls volleyball, and I'd like to thank Jamie Dick and our Parks and Rec staff for coordinating this youth sports program. I'd also like to thank HCC for the partnership that we have with them and using their facilities. Our next meeting is next week on December the 17th, and that's everything that I have.
Okay. Thank you. Next up is citizens' participation. This is an opportunity for citizens to comment about an issue or issues of county practices and interests. This is not an interactive dialogue or question and answer session. It is solely time to hear from citizens and their comments. And we ask that you please keep your remarks to 3 minutes or less. With that, we have anyone here this morning for citizens' participation? Ms. Phillips.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for your service. Today, I am suggesting you meet with your counterparts in Berkeley County, West Virginia immediately to consider a joint proposal for the new FBI headquarters to be divided into 2 buildings, one here and one there. Also, submit grant proposals to Governor Moore and President Biden's administration, emphasizing the following points that 2 counties from 2 states can do working together. 1, working together cooperatively to support regional and national security. 2, this will help complement and balance power with intelligence communities. 3, working cooperatively, staffing of our civil servants. 4, rebranding and modeling of Collegetown Wounded Warriors Hub. 5, continuing to preserve and expand farming capabilities for local food sources, carefully reviewing all new planned communities. 6, funding for more trade training to rebuild infrastructure and repair and make use of the surplus of used cars in the region. 7, an extraordinary aquatic training facility in Berkeley, 2+ million gallons, with everything from learning to swim, aquatic therapy, especially for our veterans, and Coast Guard and Navy training, inspiring youth to reach their aquatic potential. A complementary, comparable facility could also be built at HCC in the back where they have all those cornfields. In addition, an equine and park ranger training facility locally, again, where there can be youth participation. And possibly, number 10, possibly buildings for increasing the strategic oil and gas reserves. One staycation of the 3 holidays, with everyone going to their local hotels, restaurants, museums, history, and entertainment, could triple our reserves and offer extra inspection time to repair our commercial transportation industry. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Other citizens' participation this morning? Okay, hearing none. The next item on our agenda is a public hearing, but that's scheduled for 9:30. Michelle, is there anything we can move forward with?
Yeah, we don't have SB and Company here yet, and we don't have everyone here for the ARPA. Let's take a 15-minute break, I guess.
Okay, good deal. Okay. Thank you.
We're on air.
Okay, we're back in session. Next on the agenda is a public hearing concerning a proposed modification of the fee schedule for civil violations of the Washington County zoning ordinance. The purpose of this hearing is to hear public testimony concerning the matter. The procedure is as follows. We will first have staff introduce the matter, after which the hearing will be open for public comment and testimony. Each speaker will be given a maximum of 3 minutes to testify. After everyone who wishes to speak has done so, the hearing will close. The commissioners may then discuss the issue and may move to adopt the proposed fee schedule as presented or modified at any point following the closure of the public hearing. At this time, I'm going to ask Jill Baker, would you please introduce the matter?
Good morning, Commissioners. Jill Baker, Director of the Department of Planning and Zoning. Before you today, as mentioned, is a request to adopt a fee schedule for penalties related to civil violations of the Washington County zoning ordinance. As part of the department's budget review, it was discovered that we do not have a current fee schedule related to the zoning ordinance violations. Without this adopted fee schedule, property owners have been subject to the maximum penalty of $500 per violation. That maximum penalty is state legislated. It can't go above that number. I want to make sure that we understand that issuance of penalties are a last resort option for us. We always and consistently attempt to work with these property owners to first and foremost gain compliance. The way we do that is upon initial inspection, if a violation is found, we immediately issue what we call a field correction notice. That puts the property owner on notice that there is something wrong and that we ask them to contact us to try to rectify the situation. Once they contact us, we put together a plan of how we're going to gain compliance. That may take several extensions because we understand in some of these cases, the violation didn't happen overnight. Therefore, we're not going to be able to fix it overnight. There are several properties where we have granted extensions for 6 months now, but we set milestones in between those extensions for them to clean up certain aspects so that we can gain final compliance. So I do want to make that very clear that this is a 100% last-ditch effort for us to gain the attention of those property owners and to gain compliance. They also have the option that once the citation is made, they have the option to not pay that fee and actually stand trial. They have the option to stand trial at circuit court. That way, it would be up to the judge to determine what the compliance would be, the timelines, and what the fines would be. Again, very last-ditch effort for us to gain compliance.
You might be getting to this, but just for clarification, examples of, okay, junk cars, right? Trash on a property, right?
Correct.
And then animal husbandry?
Animal husbandry has to do with farm animals that are on properties and have structures that don't meet setbacks. So any structure that houses an animal, if you have up to 2 animals, you have to have a 100-foot setback from all property lines. If you have more than 2 animals, you have to have, I think, 100 feet. I'm sorry, I got that backwards. If you have up to 2 animals, it's 100 feet from the nearest home or residence, occupied structure. And if it's more than 2 animals, you have to be 100 feet from all property lines.
And zoning you're operating something that's not permitted according to zoning? Okay,
Yeah.
that's all. I'm sorry for interrupting, but I wanted clarification for everybody.
Yes, you are correct. I will also note that violations are complaint-driven. We are not driving around looking for these issues. We are relying upon the public, and when it becomes a nuisance to them, that's when we go out and do our inspections and determine whether or not there are any violations. Therefore, what we're proposing here today is we set a much lower violation fee for the first violation, a lot of these people don't understand what they're being cited for, or they're just kind of unaware of what's going on. So we're setting that violation as you can see within the schedule. We are then asking to put escalators onto this because we do have folks where, as an example, if they have a junk vehicle, they'll take it off the property, take it to a friend's house, leave it there for a month, and then bring it right back. We've had that happen. So we would like to put escalators on this within 12-month periods so that there would be second violations, and then third and additional violations would have escalators. Again, the very maximum that we can charge is $500 per violation. That is state legislated. When we take that to court, when and if we take that to court, that can be doubled per state legislation to $1,000 per violation. But again, that goes before the judge, and the judge will determine how much, if any, penalty should be assigned to that.
Okay, just for
Wait a
clarification
minute.
again.
We need to wait until the hearing's closed before we have any commissioner.
I can't talk for, ask for clarification?
This is a public hearing, you ask those questions when it comes our turn.
We'll bring it back to the commissioners.
Yeah,
I'm thinking if people's listening, they're not knowing that.
if they wait for the,
Okay.
for our questions. But
I'll stand corrected. Go ahead.
Questions in between, we disrupt the public hearing, that's all.
Actually, that kind of concludes my presentation. This has been reviewed by the county attorney's office, so we have concurrence there. So that's what I have. I assume you want to open it up then to.
Okay, well, at this point now, I'll open it up for public comment. Anyone wishing to comment here this morning? Paulie?
Jill, can you bring him back a microphone?
I'll speak loudly, I think everybody can hear my voice. I just have a question relative to the zoning. Does this also qualify with junk and junk vehicles on county roads?
His question was, does this also apply to junk and junk vehicles on county roads?
Yes, I know a couple vehicles that their licenses have expired on the tickets.
With expired license
Expired
plates.
licenses in there, and they're sitting out on the road. One of them doesn't even have an engine. It's on the county road. That's all. Thank you very much.
So the answer is yes. If we are informed about a vehicle that does not have a current tag or is inoperable on a county road, typically what we do is if it doesn't have a tag, we call the state police or county police, and then they deal with, I think they have it towed away because it doesn't have a current tag on it. So we have had, I think, 2 instances of that where they have been parked along a county road and do not have a tagged vehicle or a current tag. And that is dealt with through the sheriff's office and/or state police.
Okay, any other comments from the public here this morning? Hearing none, now I'll bring it back to the commissioners for commissioners' questions and comments.
I guess the reason I question, I know that we've done this, and I've only done this for 6 years, so I should know, but I don't. If I get something for clarification and Paulie's done, then how does he come back and I might raise a question that
Well,
somebody.
we have a decorum to follow a public hearing. If we're going to interrupt everybody during the meeting, then what the heck you having a public hearing, Randy? You know better than that.
I do know better, but it seems to me,
Mark clearly gave the example how the policy in the public hearing was to.
I understand that, but I think I have a point.
Slightly correct you so we can follow the order of
Okay.
policy.
Whatever. Okay, anyway, can you, it still makes no sense. Paulie would have.
Maybe you need 6 more years of
Well,
learning.
well, that probably won't happen either. But On clarification on the fines again, first violation within 12 months period is 150, right? And then it
150.
says second violation with 12-month period. Is that a different violation or?
Yes, so as, using my example of if we issue a field correction notice or a citation
Right.
for, let's say, a junk vehicle, and you take that off your property, and then you get another junk vehicle, or you bring that back, and
Gotcha.
it's within a 12-month period, and we have to come back and issue another citation, we're going to escalate that.
So you could possibly have a couple violations going on. You could have a zoning violation plus a junk violation plus what? Reason I ask is we get, commissioners, I think I speak for all of us, we get a lot of calls on this. And, you know, it's what can we do? What can you do? When we get a call, you got to send a field check. And then, you know, I think in a way, what I'm thinking out loud here is that the 500 might have been for the first time for the people that really aren't bad offenders, might have been a bit much. But again, we'll talk about it, but anyway.
I have a couple questions if I could ask. First of all, when it says junk vehicles, and it, in parentheses, may be issued as singular or joint violations, I just want to make sure that, you know, all of our citizens are being treated equally, even if we have different inspectors. So, you know, if one person may have 2 junk vehicles on their property and they're charged 2 fees, and someone may have 3 and they're only charged 1 fee, which is it? Which will it be?
I'm sorry, that, for clarification purposes, and maybe it doesn't make sense, I can see where the misunderstanding is. When we say singular or joint violations, a lot of times we get just junk violations, period. And there's no junk vehicles on the property. So we only issue a violation for junk. If there happens to be both junk vehicles and other junk on the property, we will issue that as 1 citation, not 2. We won't, we view those as intermingled, that they, one or the other or both. And then the only separate violations would be if you met either the animal husbandry or the zoning, operating without zoning permit. So junk and junk vehicles,
Okay.
we issue as 1 citation.
Okay, got it. I want to make sure we're not too restrictive defining junk vehicles. It may be somebody's classic car that they're restoring, and, you know, they might take offense to if you call it junk, but how would we handle a situation like that? Maybe it's titled in somebody's name, maybe it's just not tagged, they're working on it. When does it cross the line as to junk in the county's viewpoint?
Basically, if it is not tagged, we view that as a junk vehicle because it's not tagged. It theoretically has not been through inspection, and it is probably inoperable. If it's not, then we just tell them, you know, you can go get a tag and put on that, and we'll leave you alone.
What if it's just a frame of a rusted out vehicle that they're
Yeah.
waiting to restore it?
Now, what I will say is this, is that we are working on amendments to the zoning ordinance to change that. Many counties, what they do is they allow 1, sometimes 2 vehicles without any issue, junk vehicles. So they can be untagged, because we are running into that. And we want to fix that, where somebody has a vehicle that is literally there just for parts, and they're trying to rebuild a car with their kid or with their dad or whatever. So we are in the process of doing amendments right now to ease up on the quote-unquote junk
Because
vehicles.
that car may not have a registration if they're using it for parts, it's just there.
Correct.
So you're saying you want to get an amendment so that's not classified as a junk vehicle and be written up for a violation?
We would want to do an amendment to allow junk vehicles as a use on the property, but limit it to 1, possibly 2.
Okay.
Jill, we've dealt with junk cars and properties before,
Yes.
and some that we've addressed in Leitersburg had a dozen cars. But if they put an appropriate canvas cover over the car, then it's fine.
No.
Well, that's what we ran into in Leitersburg.
And
That was a previous administrator who said that was okay. Basically, at this point, if we see it, I don't understand how we can just tarp it and say it's not there
well,
anymore.
if it's covered, pardon me, if it's covered by canvas, how do you know it's tagged? Are you going on someone's property to lift up the canvas?
If it's already canvassed before we get there, there's no way for us to know.
Okay, so here's the question. I have Jeep Cherokees, 92, 96, 98, 99. One of them is inoperable. Okay. I have it canvas covered on my property, behind my garage. And I use it for parts. And I don't think it would be appropriate for us to say a vehicle like that, if you're maintaining it and you're not making your whole yard a junkyard. I'm rural, but a $300 registration fee is what we have now, right, with cars?
Close to it.
And if you're going to register it, the state requires you to have minimal insurance on it too, which will add an additional cost. So I think we need to look at some way of navigating this, and I think you're going to do that.
Yes.
Okay. And the second question I have would be a violation. If you fine someone $150 for a car or something, and they don't move the car, and they're willing to pay for the car the $150 fine, at what point in time does the second violation kick in? Within 90 days or a week?
So the way the citations work is that once you pay the fine, you're also told you still must mitigate the problem. Paying the fine doesn't get you out of mitigating the problem. So they're told that. And then what we do is we say, okay, you paid the fine. We notify them that you still have to mitigate the problem. We go out and re-inspect after 30 days. If the problem is still there, we will issue a second notification. Please also keep in mind,
That notification be a fine?
there could be. Please keep in mind that we don't go out there and immediately issue fines. That is not what's happening.
Okay. So first violation, 150, then you hit me the next month, 300, so that's 450. Then you can hit me for 500, so now you're at 950. Then it says here, and then additional violations within that month would be at $500 each.
You're not mitigating the problem. And we are still getting the complaints from the neighbors. So that's why I said, you can still take this to the judge, and the judge can rule one way or the other. Either they're gonna say, no, I'm okay with you tarping it up, or no, you gotta move that vehicle, but I'll reduce your fine to just court costs, or something to that effect.
So where does this rule apply? Does it apply to a farm?
It applies everywhere in Washington County.
Okay, well, I see a major problem with that then.
And this is more than just cars too, correct? Is this
Yes.
buildings?
Buildings?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
That is the building code.
Well, my questions I have, maybe a statement. You have 30 cars been on their property for years, and they can't afford to pay the fine, they can't afford to remove them. What happens then? And
They can elect to go to court,
court,
talk to the judge, and see what the judge will say.
and if the judge reprimands them to remove the cars, and they still don't have the finances, the capability to do it, then what would happen?
They will be found in contempt of court, probably.
And then let the cars still stay there? Does someone else remove them? And whose
We
fault?
can't remove them. We have no title. We have nowhere to put them. So we are going to have to rely upon the court to decide how they get taken away.
Okay.
And a
Next
tot-
thing, I just want to sum up,
Yeah.
pardon me, thank you. Sum up a statement. We're not, this is our last option, to commit the
Correct.
fine and get them to court.
Correct.
And what's prompted this maybe is we have not had the hammer to enforce on the habitual offenders. Is that maybe a good word to use? We have people who just won't follow through with our enforcement or violations, and this is to maybe prompt them to action for the worst offenders, if that's correct?
With the worst, yeah. So first of all, the first goal of this was to reduce the fine for first-time offenders. Because like I said, right now, it's $500 flat. So our first course of action, what we really wanted to do was to reduce that fine. It seems onerous for a first-time offender that, for whatever reason, may or may not be aware of what's happening. The escalator has to do with those that are the worst offenders, that are not cleaning up the property, that are not responding to us, and that are basically just ignoring the law. That's the point. And again, I can't stress this enough. Only a small handful really get to the citation phase, because we work so hard to get compliance. Like I said, we have properties out there right now. I can specifically tell you of one without telling you where it is or who it is, where they had 7 junk vehicles, 2 junk campers, 3 large metal scrap piles, and metal cans pouring out of a building. That didn't happen overnight, nor do we expect it to be fixed overnight. That property owner has talked to us, has responded to us, and we have given him 6 months' worth of extensions, and will continue to give him extensions, provided he keeps meeting our milestones and cleaning up the situation. We are not in this for money. I don't want money, I want compliance. That's all I want. And that's what the neighbors want. Because I can't tell you how many neighbors call in and complain, and they expect us to fix this thing the very next day. And that doesn't happen. We have to give that property owner due process. They need to be able to take the time to do what they need to do to fix the problem.
About how many fines did we levy last year? Do you have any idea how many incidents?
I would say since January 1st of this year, we have issued 12 citations over probably 300 or 400 field correction notices.
Yeah, so 12 fines and 300 or 400. I guess there's only 2 concerns I would have at this point is what Commissioner Harvey brought up, the farms. I mean, you could physically go on a farm, and typically farmers have a lot of stuff sitting around. That could be a problem. I know, but what I guess the next only concern I would have, this sounds like you guys really do a good job of, the last thing you want to do is charge somebody some money, but, you know, things happen. Staff changes, and it's in the books, this is what we're going to do. The next staff comes in and says, no. Boom, here's your 150, here's your 500, no warnings. I know it's a reach, but it's just something you got to think about when, you know, nothing's forever.
So is there a written policy that lays out what you communicated to us about your approach?
Yes, sir.
There is a written policy that lays that out?
Yes, I have a written policy on that, yes, sir.
Okay, so we're going to engage, we're going to navigate it.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's reassuring. So I guess for me, I understand lowering the first one, fine. I think what is missing here, and it's not a change because this has been the policy, if a neighbor doesn't like another neighbor and complains about it, one vehicle, you know, for spare parts or whatever, then you'll come out. And if there's no complaints and someone has 8 cars or other junk, you're not coming out. And so, you know, we deal with a lot of neighbor-on-neighbor issues that we can't even resolve. You know, we get calls about a lot of things like that. So I'm worried about where and how you apply this. But it's already a policy. I don't know what we need to do, because I understood from previous engagement that if you put a canvas cover over your vehicle, it was fine. and you didn't need to have it registered with plates and insurance. But if we're going to require registration and plates, with plates and insurance, that's going to be $800 for a junked car sitting there that's worth $500. Now, maybe that's the choice people are going to have to make, but I am a little,
How soon before you can have the recommended amendment prepared, allowing one, possibly two vehicles that would satisfy Commissioner Harvey's concerns?
under some conditions, like being tarp covered or something,
And I would also add, I brought up about a project car, somebody working on in their driveway, just defining that, because it may not be tagged, and potentially, depending on how, much of a project it is, it may not even be titled, I suppose. But, I think those people need some grace as well, and, that may be a father and son project that takes years to finish. I wouldn't want to limit that in any way. I have a concern about junk vehicles and just how we classify it as junk. One man's junk is another man's treasure. If someone's operating a junkyard, that's a different, something else. But I have a concern about that. And if I can, I'd like to jump down to animal husbandry. You said up to 2 animals. Well, first of all, is there a reason why the first and second violation is a different amount than the junk vehicles and operating without proper zoning permits? Is there a reason, just consistency, they're different amounts?
The animal husbandry tends to be the number one thing we get complaints about. And because, I don't know how to put it, I'm thinking about it. So basically, because it happens so often, and we do gain compliance pretty quickly, therefore the fine usually doesn't even come into play. We feel like the chicken thing would probably be better as a slightly lower amount.
Okay, so let me ask this. I certainly wouldn't want illegal puppy mills running in the county, but what about those people who may have, a male and female AKC registered dog that they breed on occasion?
Completely separate, they are
But it's 2
domesticated.
animals
No, that,
if it's domesticated.
so dogs, the way that dogs go is that they have kennel licenses
Okay.
through the Humane Society.
it's 5 or more.
Yeah, something like that. We don't deal with dogs. We don't deal with that. That's purely Humane Society. Same thing with cats. We don't deal with that. We are looking at domesticated farm animals.
So are chicken coops a particular problem?
Yes.
And some of the towns allow them within the residential communities,
I think one of them does.
but that's a trend elsewhere.
Yes. So that's the other thing with the animals. We are also looking into amendments to the ordinance to have, for lack of a better term, a backyard chicken ordinance, where we would allow up to X number of chickens in a backyard without any kind of permits or setbacks or things like that. Many places, I think the cutoff is like 5, and then there's a condition that there are no roosters. So we're looking into something like that, because chickens, I can't even begin to tell you the number of complaints that we get every day on chickens. Goats are becoming the next most popular animal for people to keep. We rarely get anything for cows, horses, larger animals like that. Pigs every once in a while, because you deal with the potbelly pigs are a popular pet nowadays. So we try to temper that. But chickens are the big trend.
Okay.
Any other questions? Any Motions or thoughts?
I think Jill's going to work on something else, I think.
We have to close the public hearing.
Better close the public
Okay,
hearing first.
no other comments? Hearing no other comments, at this point, we'll close the public hearing is concluded.
My preference would be to bring this back when we can see the companion policies and any revisions that may be made to the policies, so we can do it as a package. My preference.
I'd agree with that.
Consensus on
I
that?
don't want to decide today. I want to agree with one of you.
Okay,
So we'll bring it back when we have the amendments prepared for it, and then we'll send the policies to you separately via email. Jill, if you can get those policies to me, and then we'll bring this back once we have the amendments ready.
okay.
Okay.
If there's changes to the policy, does that require commissioner approval too?
I think they're just department policies.
So how do we ensure that the department doesn't change those policies, as I think Randy alluded to, changeover in staff, and those policies are changed without us knowing? Just since that is a concern for us.
To be blunt about it, you would hear about it from the citizens. And I always rely.
After they get a $500 fine, though.
No. Well, I see where you're going with that. Yes, I see where you're going with that. So again, we would rely upon the citizens to talk to their elected officials. I understand where you're coming from, that the next person may think something differently. I'll leave it to you if you want to adopt a policy. I think it will be a little bit cumbersome, but like I said, if anything would change with a new director, my guess would be is that the citizens would be the first ones to tell you that something's hinky.
Why, why couldn't you just keep the policy? Why couldn't you just keep a policy we approve it, and that policy stays there till the next board or the current board?
Whatever you want to do.
So we could do that. We'll bring it back with the policy so that it's formally adopted by the Board of County Commissioners to ensure that, when Jill decides she wants to retire, her replacement doesn't make a new policy. Does that work? Yeah. Okay. And then we'll bring it back once we have the amendments that she had discussed earlier regarding the backyard chicken ordinance and the potentially allowing 1 to 2 vehicles, and the manner in which they must be stored with a canvas cover. Okay? All right, thanks, Jill.
Okay, thank you. Next is presentation of the June 30th, 2024 audited financial statements.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Chris Lehman. I was the engagement partner over this year's financial statement audit services, again, for the services that we perform for the county. So I have a brief presentation that I'll walk through here that goes through our firm and industry required communications. Excuse me. The scope of services are listed here on this slide. I won't read through each one of our deliverables, but we were engaged to audit the June 30, 2024 financial statements for the county. In addition, the state also requires what's termed a Uniform Financial Report, or UFR, to be submitted upon completion of the audit. Both of those items have been submitted on time to the state. In addition, the county is also required to undergo what's termed a single audit. That's a federal compliance audit related to any entity that expends more than $750,000 per year of federal funds, and we're still going through that process. And then you'll see the other deliverables here really under federal or state requirements to be completed. So we've issued what's termed an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. That's a clean opinion, and that would be the best opinion. we could give under professional standards. We did not discover any instances of fraud. A financial statement audit is not a forensic audit, but we are required to have a healthy skepticism that fraud could happen at any time. We had no, excuse me, we had no audit adjustments that we proposed through the audit process, so that just speaks to the quality of the accounting system and the ledger that's maintained during the year. We also had no material weaknesses identified in any of the internal controls, and I have a couple slides coming up that'll highlight the key processes. To date, we have no single audit findings to report, so we're anticipating issuing clean opinions on the compliance audit. And we also received the full cooperation of management. So any records that we requested, we got adequate backup for those items. Questions that we asked, we received timely and adequate responses to those questions. This here is just a picture of our risk-based audit approach. Really, the audits really happens in two key phases. One is assessing the design and the operation of the controls. That's understanding how key processes impact the financial statements, and also testing transactions to make sure those transactions are being recorded to the ledger properly. Then once management closes the books, we go through a process to audit the year-end numbers. That's primarily looking at substantive testing, looking at financial misstatement analysis to get comfortable with the year-end balances. When we go through the key processes, we also conclude whether or not there's an effective control environment for the period under audit. So there's 5 interrelated components listed here. 3 of them on this slide: the control environment, management's risk assessment process, the control activities, as well as the information and communication and the monitoring of internal controls. And then we concluded that there was an effective environment for the period under audit. Typically, if there's not an effective environment, that's where we find audit entries, material weaknesses, potentially deficiencies in controls, and like I said, we had none of those items. And then looking at the key processes, and what we're looking at is both the design and the operation of the process. The design is how managements develop policies and procedures related to these items being, these transactions being processed on a timely and accurate basis, and then we do testing of transactions to determine whether the results would show that they are recorded accurately on a timely basis. So you'll see the processes listed here, looking at treasury function, looking at investment and bank reconciliations. There's certain estimates within the financial statements, significantly around pension and OPEB accounting, has a lot of actuarial assumptions that go into those calculations. Looking at how management closes the books on a timely and accurate basis, looking at the expenditure, the disbursement cycle, as well as the payroll cycle, revenue cycle, fixed assets, and grant compliance from a single audit perspective. And we've concluded that all areas were both designed and operating effectively for the period under audit. And then lastly, some of these points I mentioned on the earlier slide, if we had difficulties getting through the audit, if we had disagreements with management, which there were none of those, I'd be required to bring that to your all's attention. There's really nothing of a negative nature that I need to bring to your attention through the audit process. The idea being, although we issued a clean opinion, if we had lots of adjustments or problems getting to the clean opinion, a user of the statements wouldn't necessarily know that just by looking at the report. So it's really a clean results, clean bill of health through the results or through the audit process. And then lastly, I've just included my contact information here. Oops, if I can get to it. Just if there's questions outside of audit season, we do make ourselves available to answer questions. We do work with management. If there are questions throughout the year, we don't want you all to feel like you have to hold your questions until we come out and audit. If there's an issue or an accounting matter that's not during audit season, that's fresh in your mind, we can tackle those as they arise. Any questions, comments?
Questions? Good job, Kelsey.
Really, this is management's report card, so.
Good morning, Kelsey Mays, Chief Financial Officer. I just want to do a quick review for the general fund for fiscal year '24. So before I start, I would like to thank Budget and Finance staff for their hard work in completing the financial statements and getting us a successful audit. So the annual budget provides the basis for controlling and coordinating the county's resources for programs and services. The original general fund budget for fiscal year '24 was $281.1 million. There were $22.5 million in adjustments made to bring the final budget to $303.6 million. The budget adjustments were related to the use of reserves for anticipated costs, recording in-kind contributions to outside agencies, and $2.7 million of that was related to the sale of property of the Children's Village, as well as unexpected grants. Total revenues for fiscal year '24 were $339.1 million, and total expenditures were $338.9 million, resulting in an excess of revenues of $0.2 million. This expenditure total does include the $19 million transfer to the CIP Reserve Fund and the $10 million that was additional for the pension fund approved by the Commission on October 8th. Revenue growth compared to fiscal year '23 is 10.97%, while expenditure growth compared to fiscal year '23 was 3.04%. And I just want to point out that there is a bond refunding included in the revenues, and without that bond refunding, the revenue growth was 8.5%. The percentage of cash reserves required is calculated based on general fund revenue. As revenue increases, the required cash reserve also increases. In fiscal year '24, the general fund cash reserve was $73.5 million, or 22.39%, which equals about 3 months of cash reserves, and is 2.19% less than fiscal year '23's 24.5%. The county's cash reserves as a percent of revenue target is 17%, or $57.6 million, which translates to about 2 months of reserves. The actual cash reserve is approximately $15.8 million over the minimum requirement. Revenues exceeded final budget by $35.5 million, or 11.7%. The net of real and personal property tax created a $7.7 million over the final budget. Personal property tax relates to business personal property and is a good indication of business growth in the county. Income tax was over budget $8.6 million. Withholdings came in at $98.3 million, which is $1.9 million, or 2% more than fiscal year '23, but was $1.6 million less than anticipated. Reconciling distributions came in at $12.8 million over budget, at $12.8 million, which was $3.4 million more than fiscal year '23 and $7.7 million more than budget. Interest and penalties collected were $6 million, which is an increase of $0.4 million and $2.3 million over budget. The disparity grant income was $3 million, which was a 22% decrease from fiscal year's '23 revenue of $3.8 million. Overall, fiscal year '24 income tax revenue increased $4.3 million, or 3.5% from the FY '23 revenue received. Recordation tax was $0.8 million short of the final budget and is an indication of a return to normal business following the spike in activity due to the recent construction. Fiscal year '24 revenue is down 23.2% from the FY '23 amount received. Interest was $13.5 million over budget. The interest rates remained around 5% for the entire fiscal year, since anticipated rate cuts by the Fed did not occur until recently. Other revenue was over budget $6.5 million, primarily due to proceeds from refunding bonds of $8.5 million, which has a direct cost in the debt service item, the sale of property of $2.7 million, and $0.9 million in proceeds from leased assets, $0.4 million from grants, offset by budgeted use of reserves of $5.2 million. Expenditures exceeded final budget by $35.3 million. As mentioned earlier, but based on the Commission's decision on October 8th, a $19 million transfer to the capital fund was made prior to year-end close. Debt service was over budget by $8.5 million due to refunding our 2014 general obligation bonds. Wages were over budget by $1 million. This overage was due to overtime, which overrode our vacancy savings. Benefits were over budget $5.7 million due to the $10 million pension fund amount approved by the commission, offset by the savings from vacancies. Departmental operations were under budget by $0.2 million. These operational savings were spread out among the various departments. Lastly, controllable assets were $1.3 million over budget, mainly due to the accounting for leased assets. These entries are non-cash and have a corresponding revenue. So as we are looking at our 26 budget process, there are a number of factors that the commission will still need to consider. Commissioners have made great strides in improving the salary scale, and additional changes are needed to continue that work. Infrastructure maintenance programs and CIP will continue to need to be reevaluated as we continue to make up for maintenance that has been deferred. And lastly, as we continue navigating the transition of EMS, current and future financial impact must be considered. So that concludes my part of the presentation, and I open it up to the board for questions. Yes.
Would you explain what details infrastructure maintenance other than roads and bridges? What else does that category include?
So that would also be the infrastructure related to our landfill and infrastructure related to our water and sewer systems.
The equipment operation?
Yes, and our equipment.
So backhoes, plows,
yes.
Trucks,
Yes.
internet broadband too, as part of our infrastructure?
Yes.
So there's a whole list.
Yes.
So when I ask, sometimes you say infrastructure, people are just thinking roads and bridges, but it entails a lot more.
It would be all of our capital equipment that we use to maintain those roads and bridges.
So it could be quite expensive.
They are getting quite expensive.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Good job.
Congratulations on a good audit.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Next item is American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, allocations.
Good morning, Commissioners. Kelsey Mace, Chief Financial Officer, on behalf of the ARPA Committee.
Andrew Eshelman, Director of Public Works, also ARPA member.
And Dave Hayes should probably come on up.
So the ARPA Committee is requesting to reallocate $152,948 remaining from projects that are complete, as well as $3,281,602 remaining from the Ag Center multi-use building, for a total of $3,434,550. The ARPA Committee met on November 4th, 2024, to discuss the reallocation of remaining ARPA funds. The recommendations of the ARPA Committee are as follows. For $3 million to be reallocated to the Public Safety Training Center Tactical Village Project for the High Bay Storage Building, and $434,550 to be reallocated to a new project that would design and build an all-inclusive playground at Marty Snook Park. This new playground would include play areas for ages 2 to 5 and 5 to 12, rubber surfacing, and accessible routes to playground facilities and restrooms, sensory areas, shaded gathering areas and seating, fenced-in play area, and equipment for inclusive play and socialization for all children. So at this time, I'll open it up to board if they have any questions about the recommendation.
It would be my request to separate these two into two separate motions instead of one combined as recommended.
Yeah, we could vote on the training center, $3 million first, and then discuss either or.
However the board would like to handle it.
Are we still under a timeline? I know with ARPA funding, it seems like those timelines have been pushed back every.
Yes, so we are
Couple
still
months.
under a December 31st timeline.
Of this
to
year.
at least have everything, as they consider obligated, but assigned to a project. It is my understanding that as long as we have the designated projects, if we need to reallocate between those, that's fine, but the deadline for anything new is December 31st.
Can that designated project be changed later after the deadline?
I don't believe so. I think the wording is that it must be allocated, so the project list should be set and defined, and then we have until the end of '26 to spend all the funds.
Well, I'll motion, I want these separated to two different votes. Is there?
So I think the thing would be motion to approve $3 million to the tactical village correct? Is that what you have?
And I'll second that if that was your motion.
Yeah, that was.
Well, we have two motions and 2 seconds on the floor. It was, the first motion with the second was to separate them. So let's vote on that. Then we'll,
Okay, motion to separate them.
okay? Everyone okay with that? Okay, now the second motion.
Motion to approve $3 million for the tactical building.
Second.
Whatever. Second.
Okay, motion is second. All in favor? Saying aye? Opposed, same sign? Okay, now, just
I think that there's just going to be some questions on some of it. That's all.
Okay. And that's why I have Andrew here to answer those for you.
Before we get into that, Kelsey, do you have a dollar amount of money that was spent for the multi-use ag center that's not going to, because I recall back in March of, I can't remember if it was this year or last year, we approved maybe a $900,000 give or take contract for architectural drawings, and did we spend all of that, or what's been
No.
spent so far?
So we spent $218,398.
Okay, and I agree with not having the building at the Ag Center. I opposed it in the beginning, but did we get any benefit out of that $218,000 expense? Is there anything that we can hold on to? Or
We retain the rights to all the
work
work
product?
that was completed, so, I mean, there was site evaluation work that was done down there, investigative work for future septic locations,
So unless
as
we
well
do
as the drawings.
a building at the Ag Center, that money's gone?
Well, the money
Because we
that's been
can't use
spent.
that site work was done for that location, not somewhere else.
Well, there's some things that would have value regardless of what we did. If we ever did expansion at the Ag Center, whether it's that building or something else, we're at sewer capacity. So we had to do the perk testing, the evaluation for all of that. So that retains value regardless of if we proceed with a indoor building. Other things related to the architectural drawings, we retain what was completed. Now, could be discussions later, about if that design was specific for that location. Obviously, site civil work is going to be site-specific, architectural, may not be.
any other questions or comments?
Yeah, who's on the ARPA committee?
So the ARPA committee is made up of the county administrator, the chief financial officer, director of public works, director of environmental management, director of emergency services, director of business and economic development, the director of engineering, and the ARPA grant manager.
Is there any process in play after you made those recommendations to come before us and brief us before we were here today on this? And the reason why I asked, I'm on the Parks and Rec Committee. In a meeting last week, there was no mention of a designated project at Marty Snook Park under old or new business. As a commissioner, I'd like to have been briefed before today about a possible park, or especially at the Parks and Rec Committee with the blessing of that committee or knowledge of that committee. Why wasn't that done?
So the project that was being recommended, we've presented that in our county presentations during program Open Space the past several years. It hasn't had the funding to proceed. If you recall, we had the local parks and playground infrastructure grants for a period of 2 years. And so we were very successful in using that money to modernize our parks. And so for a while there, we had the additional funds, and so the project was requested at that time. We also had it as our legislative priority. I believe 2 years ago, it didn't go out of committee. So it has been discussed in the past. It's just, as far as playgrounds go, it's such a enormous expense relative to a traditional one because of all the additional grading and the surfacing. And so that's why it's kind of been its own
When you said modernization, how much was the modernization that we recently did?
Oh.
That's ARPA funds as well, correct? Or was that-
No, the modernization was the LPPI money. There was 2 years, so total allocation of the program was $1.5 million each year. The county didn't retain all that, but I would suffice to say it was probably, $1.5 million to upgrade bathrooms, facilities. We could get an exact number on that. So the work that you see in most of the parks for the modernization that happened with the pavilions, the new roofs, the lighting, the bathrooms, the park playgrounds, that was done through the LPPI.
Okay,
So would we be able to, it sounds like maybe there's some hesitation, maybe the Parks Board should look at this project, but do you think it would be possible to allocate the money for the purpose of ARPA meeting their December deadline of saying we want to have county-wide park improvement upgrades and just fine tune what that is later on?
Pardon the interruption. My question is why 400,000? Where's the concept plan for this park? Why does it have to be 400? All playgrounds are inclusive. You're asking for an all-inclusive $400,000 playground. And not to interrupt you, to hold you up, but my concern, we have so many other priorities. For example, let's take the Ag Center. That building was derailed or not funded, but I understand South County doesn't have an evacuation center. That our Ag Center doesn't have generators, doesn't have facilities for long-term stay. South County's had a railroad bridge on fire, they've had a railroad derailment, we missed a tornado by 10 miles, we had a flood. Why aren't we considering this ARPA money for some options to take care of South County with an evacuation center other than a $400,000 playground? Now, for background, I've helped write playground grants with the Town Council of Williamsport for 2 playgrounds and been a strong supporter of Parks and Rec. But why $400,000? Why it all-inclusive when we have other priorities that this ARPA could take care of? It concerns me that South County doesn't have an evacuation area, especially right now with no long-term facilities to stay, just mentioning the 4 things I just mentioned. And I'm concerned that it wasn't brought back and forth from the Parks and Rec. We're hearing about it today. I just want to know why 400,000? Why isn't a $100,000 playground with POS money? Now, I know from being in the Parks meeting, POS money is going to get cut. But why isn't there more of a focus on public safety with this ARPA money than a playground? Again, I've helped write playground grants for the town of Williamsport. I'm surely a big Parks and Rec person all my life. I just want to know how it was derived at a figure for $400,000 when we have so many other needs with this ARPA money. And that's the question that convinced me to support this.
So, I mean, it is ultimately the commissioner's discretion as to how to use the funds. I think going back when the ARPA committee originally was set up, there was different categories that the funds could be spent. And so part of the work that the ARPA committee did was looking at the needs within those areas. Not that there was, a set percentage that needed to go there, but trying to acknowledge each of the areas. And so investing in, parks and recreation, outdoor space was an early part of that. It doesn't mean that that can't change and public safety can't be a larger portion. So, I mean, as far as how the 434,000, it was essentially the remainder amount after the 3 million was put towards the high base storage building.
Be put forth 3 million point 4 and leave 200,000 for parks.
It could be. I mean, and again, the playground, honestly, that's not even the full cost. That we could scale the project back, but the word inclusive, so all playground equipment is supposed to be ADA accessible, but really when you're talking about inclusivity, it's having those children with physical disabilities, mental disabilities, other types of disabilities be able to interact with all children. And so the facility that we have there now, My High, which is a nonprofit organization, actually built the one piece of playground equipment.
That's one of the playgrounds that as a town councilman, we modeled our first playground down in Williamsport. Williamsport also built a 3rd playground in its Barron Memorial Park that was also an all-inclusive playground, interactive, because we had Marshall Street and other kids there at schools for that day of that ribbon cutting and ground that facility. But why 400,000? And again, I'd like to see a concept plan or something of more of a drawing in details what we're going to spend it on than just allocating $400,000 when I can sit here and tell you about other needs for South County.
I don't know, it wasn't in the package, but I mean, we do have concepts for the playground, and these were in the presentations that we previously did, the Parks and Rec. Director Hayes, you want to talk about the high bay storage building and perhaps why 3 million was?
Well, we're okay with the 3 million. I want to focus on whether we're going to approve $400,000 for this park or part of it or all of it or whatever. I'm okay with what we've done, 3 million.
Okay.
We need to take some of this money and put back to public safety, or you commissioners want to do 400,000.
We already voted on 3 million to the training center.
Right.
So that's over with. I guess my question would be, it's $434,000 for the playground. I get it. But why couldn't we to make it more inclusive, take one of the existing playgrounds for a whole lot less money? I know you're just fixing something up a little more, or is that impossible to do? I think the problem is $434,000.
Yeah, and honestly, that's not the full cost that I have budgeted.
That gets to my point. We're going to spend $600,000, $700,000 for a playground. Again, not against playgrounds, not being all-inclusive. I've got a record of supporting that. But with all the other priorities, things I just mentioned, I could go on. This ARPA money should be used for something of a high priority, not that playgrounds aren't a priority, but why were you selecting $400,000 or a playground that's $600,000? In our tight times, economic development and taxes and fees, here we're showing our citizens if we're going to build a $700 million playground, where maybe we could do something as equal as important, but still focus more on public safety, which affects everybody. Remember, folks, you don't have an ambulance there in 7 minutes and you're unconscious without air, you're done. I've already mentioned several natural disasters or incidents in South County, so we're not prepared for down there. So why wouldn't we take some of this ARPA money and make sure we have that ag center set up with long-term evacuation plans or ability to suffice that? Not against having any of this for a playground, but why $400,000? Why was it selected? And again, I would have liked to have been briefed more about this after November 4th, after the ARPA committee, because it looks like there was no commissioners there for any insight input on that.
So at this time, what I would recommend, based on the feedback that we're getting, that we maybe revise that $434,000 and include maybe only $100,000 based on Commissioner Kiefer's suggested use for just general Parks and Rec improvements, and then the remaining $334,550, let's reallocate that back to the Public Safety Training Center, since that is in the southern part of the county, and we'll continue to move forward on our build-out of our Public Safety Training Center.
Well, I don't disagree with anything Randy said, okay? So get that out there. And this is a redirection of ARPA funds that was originally planned for the multi-purpose center, correct?
And that multi-purpose center was also to be used as an evacuation center, but it was never promoted to us for that. And that's why you see me positioning this statement.
I agree with that. So the original cost of that activity center was $14 to $17 million, right?
Yes.
So I'm just curious, you're talking $3.4+ million here. Where was the rest of that money going to be coming from?
It was a combination of some capital reserves and some bond funding. And did you have any grant funding set aside for that?
Correct, we had some
That
program
we
open
would still
space.
need to address, but we wanted to get this ARPA piece addressed first because of the December 31st guideline or deadline, and then we would look at the rest of that project budget and determine if we just don't issue those bonds, or do we reassign them to another need, and so down the list for the
Yeah, I
additional
would have liked to
funding
have seen this more holistically presented with
Okay.
a better menu, but we do have this deadline now, and we only have one more week, right?
Correct.
And then, but thanks for clarifying that on the money. And since this was going to address at least a need at the Ag Center, and there's still needs at the Ag Center, correct?
Correct.
You know, whether it's generators or fixing plumbing or, you know, the building issues, and because there still are some capacity needs to build out the Ag Center for what the ag community would like to see there. Could we just, and just about the playground here, just a comment. All playgrounds should be for all children, right? So I don't think we need to be saying inclusive play, inclusive socialization 4 times and stuff in a paragraph. It should be all play. It should be for all kids. That's why we're doing it, right?
Well, we can talk separately about that, but there's different levels and certain features for that population that you look to incorporate in the design.
I'm not educated enough on that, so I look forward to that dialogue. But aren't there playground needs for renovation or upgrade around the county other than at Marty Snook Park?
So with the LPPI project, that took care of most of our playgrounds that were 20 years and older. So we still have what we call Marty Snook Park Playground 2, which is where we would say our ADA or inclusive playground is. That one needs to be replaced. We have one at Woodland Way and then Pleasant Valley. So those are the three bigger ones that we have left to replace.
Okay, and then maybe this is out of bounds, I don't know, Jeff, maybe it's not. But, you know, I know sometimes if we contribute money to Hancock or Boonesboro to help improve the demand that they have to improve some of their facilities, $50,000 from us goes a long ways to helping them match grants, or they can throw in money and really improve their parks. So I'm just saying we didn't really approach everything as Jeff was laying it out. So I'd like to just punt on this and maybe get some new ideas by next week on the ARPA funds for the last $432,000.
I mean, I'm okay with that, but I'm also okay with the proposal, X amount of dollars to Parks and Rec and the rest back to the training center.
I would support that. What number are you talking about?
$100,000 to general parks and recreation improvements, and then $334,550 back to the Public Safety Training Center to continue the build-out there of the many different projects that are going on. And that'll give staff time to bring back a full concept plan of not only this particular project, but of other projects for the southern portion of the county as part of our CIP plan.
That would be nice, because I think it would be nice to understand what is on the menu of options that the staff is looking at across the board, knowing that we can't fund everything, but I'd like to get a better idea about what that looks like.
So Michelle, just so I'm clear, your recommendation, $100,000 general parks, the $334,550 to the Public Safety Training Center.
For the tactical village.
And then if the idea that Jeff had mentioned comes to fruition, that would just be on a CIP funding, not paid
Not
for in
ARPA
any way by
funding.
ARPA.
Correct.
Consider either way.
Correct.
And that extra $300,000, by the time we put that to design, that to bid, that'll probably cover the cost of inflation on any that technical village project. That's another concern. So is that a motion? There's a motion for that? I'll motion.
When do you get, you need a motion.
I'll motion $100,000 to general parks and the remainder back to the Public Safety Training Center.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, ready to vote. All in favor by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is Department of Business and Economic Development Strategic Planning Update from RKG Associates Incorporated, our consultants.
Morning, Commissioners. Jonathan Horowitz, Director of the Department of Business and Economic Development. I have Kyle Talente, he's the President of RKG Associates, and Luke Polo, his associate, with us here today. This agenda item is to present you the direction and focus of the strategic plan development for the Department of Business and Economic Development. A steering committee of 15 impactful community representatives in various industries has been assembled to assist in the formation of a new economic development plan that will guide the department's efforts over the next 5 to 10 years. Kyle and his team are here today to provide an update, sort of mid-drafting of the strategic plan, and seek input and direction from your board on where we go with the drafting of this plan. And I'll be passing out a couple slides while Kyle starts.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having us here. As Jonathan said, I'm Kyle Talente. I'm the president of RKG Associates. What Jonathan is handing out is kind of a Cliff's Notes version of some of the analysis we have done to date. I'm not going to read it word for word, so hopefully that is pleasing to you. But I do kind of want to focus on some of the highlights that we've learned and give you a little bit of context. And then if we have time and you have the interest, I'm happy to engage in a conversation about what we're talking about. The very first page you can see is, just for your reference, we talk about a study area that we've used to compare Washington County to, and this map shows you the communities of which we included into the study area. We did our best to try and identify communities that are both collaborative, competitive, but also are part of the economic market in which operates, for example, where your labor shed comes from. And so that was identified through substantial engagement with both staff and the working group that Jonathan mentioned, but I just wanted to give you a visual reference of what we're talking about when we talk about the study area. So we looked at a number of different components of the market climate here in Washington County: demographic factors, economic base factors, workforce factors. We looked at the entrepreneurial environment here in the community, and we looked at real estate factors in terms of the markets that are operating here in your community relevant to economic development. There's additional work that we've been working on as well, but that's going to be for our next meeting. I can't give you everything all at once, and then you won't invite me back. So I wanted to focus on these areas with you first, and then we can talk about what we just discussed, and I also have some canned questions if we need to prime the discussion. But from a demographic perspective, really the two big takeaways that we've learned is, one, Washington County is growing, though it's not growing as fast as some of our neighbors, particularly Berkeley and Frederick County. And the population growth has been, in Washington County, has been almost exclusively people over the age of 55. And that's relevant from an economic development perspective for a number of reasons. Is one, we're seeing that folks coming into Washington County tend to have higher education levels and income levels than the folks that are living here already. A lot of these folks are semi-retirees or retirees. The impact of COVID and the decentralization of work, remote work, telecommuting, hybrid has created opportunities for folks who maybe wouldn't have looked this far out. Obviously, Frederick has been experiencing a substantial amount of suburbanization coming from both Baltimore and from the Washington, D.C. market. But now you're starting to see people look at Washington County a little bit differently now that they don't necessarily have to go into Baltimore or into D.C. as regularly. That's not necessarily a good or bad thing. It's a thing. The benefits of it is when you bring in higher income households, they have more spending potential, and so that helps support your commercial businesses. When you bring in older households, which is almost exclusively what we're getting, is there's a limited impact for trying to help not only attract new businesses here to your community, but also to sustain the businesses that you have. You'll see on a later page, I'm going to jump around a little bit, so forgive me. This is more of a free flow conversation, but over 5,000 of the workers here in Washington County are 65 and older as of right now. And so I bring that up just to say, as an example of, over the next handful of years, it is highly likely that those folks are going to need to be replaced as they enter retirement. And so when we look at your population growth, and we're not growing at all in folks between the ages of 25 and 55, that from an economic development perspective is a concern for me as I'm doing the study, because not only do we want to see more job growth here in the community, but we also want to make sure that we can preserve what we have. And so that's going to be a consideration as we move forward. As I mentioned, the growth in particularly Berkeley County, but Berkeley and Frederick County also has positive and negative impacts on us. From a positive perspective, that does increase the potential for labor pool. But as we'll talk about in just a moment, unemployment rate has returned to pre-COVID levels, which is sub 4% throughout the region. And while that's fantastic from a community perspective, from an economic development perspective, not so much. Because if I'm an employer who's looking to relocate into the region, my question is, where am I going to get my labor from? And so that has an impact both from the size and types of companies that might want to be here, but also from the perspective of, you know, the availability of labor, and then does it become competitive within the marketplace just to maintain the jobs that we have. From a economic base perspective, the market around here is evolving. I don't need to tell you all, you know a lot more about Washington County than I do, but Washington County was the economic center of this region, not just Western Maryland, but of this region of the Mid-Atlantic. And with the growth, particularly in Frederick County, but now as Berkeley County is emerging and is growing substantially, you're starting to see a decentralization of the activity and the ability of those communities to support their own economies as opposed to being part of the Washington County economy. And this is not necessarily a bad thing, right? In economic development, I'm sure you've heard the term a rising tide raises all boats. But the reality is that our market is decentralizing. And when we talk about retail, and you'll see in the report where we'll have some substantial data, is that where Washington County used to be a draw, particularly the outlets in the mall, bringing people from all over the place, we're starting to see a decline in the viability of our commercial market. Not only has e-commerce, people buying things online, has taken a bite out of the traditional brick and mortar retailers, but as Berkeley and Frederick County continue to grow and build their own commercial bases, folks that lived there that used to come here are now not doing it as frequently. The example I gave to the working group is outlets were built in, is it not Chambersburg, what is it? Clarksburg, thank you, in Montgomery County. And I know, so full disclosure, just so you all know, I live outside of Alexandria, Virginia, in Fairfax County, so I'm close but not local. But when I first moved to DC 20 some odd years ago, when we wanted outlets, we would come out here to Hagerstown. Not only do they now have outlets down in the Fredericksburg area, which is near Richmond, they've built the ones in Clarksburg. And so my willingness to drive further to get basically the same shopping experience is going to have an adverse impact on your community. But from that perspective is with the focus, my point is that our market is evolving. And one of the things that we're going to have to look at as a community is not only trying to maintain what we have and continue to sustain the economic strengths that we've already created, but to acknowledge and understand that as these market conditions continue to evolve, our economic development efforts are going to need to do so as well if we want to continue to thrive and bring in more commercial and industrial activity here into the community. The other part that I want to bring up for this is that our job growth that has been going on is kind of mismatched to the demographic changes. I mentioned already we're attracting more older folks, more highly educated folks, but our job creation has been extremely strong in the logistics and production-based economies. And those tend to only need folks, for example, that have a high school education or less than a bachelor's degree, if you will. And so as we continue to attract these jobs, but we continue to lose that population, either from attrition or from preference or from, frankly, outside pressure, that puts a strain on economic development long-term. Is, once again, I go back to not only bringing more of that type of investment here, but preserving what we've already created. From a workforce perspective, actually this is one of the strongest components that Washington has going on, is that you have a lot of active investors and players that are actively trying to pursue creating new workforce opportunities for the residents here in the community. However, what the data is telling us is that the current size of your market here isn't strong enough to support the demand from these companies, not only the ones that we have, but the ones that we're bringing in. And so we're not going to be able to solve the problem from within. While we're doing in our opinion, a very good job of trying to help folks that live here have access and opportunities to jobs that are already created or that are coming, is we're not going to be able to solve our need for labor long-term by just helping folks that live here in the community to find opportunities. We're going to need to understand the balance between housing and economic development to continue to see success and growth as we move long-term. From that perspective, what we're not here to advocate for is a complete change or a remake of the community, but to look at some of the existing assets that we have and trying to be mindful of how to be more effective and more efficient with the resources. We respect and understand, and it's been brought back to us from the working group, one, the value and the strength of the ag industry here in the community, two, the development climate and the aesthetics of the community, and the goal is to try and preserve that to the best that we can. And there are ways that you can do that from an economic development perspective where you can both create the opportunity for growth and new, for example, housing typologies and opportunities, but also then the preservation. And so we're going to be talking about that later on in terms of the strategies and recommendations about specific ways that can happen. However, I wanted to call out, as we talk about this, we're not trying to be doom and gloom here. Unfortunately, my job is to bring it to you and tell it to you straight and give you the strengths with all the challenges, but to say that there are going to be some solutions, but it may require us to maybe consider or reconsider some thoughts that we had if we really wanted to see a particular goal be fleshed out and become solution. From an entrepreneurial perspective, there are already a number of assets here. There is proactive investment. However, there's a lot of opportunity to improve. One of the things here we're talking about with Jonathan is the potential for further investment into trying to create a stronger local presence. A lot of times, if you've ever started your own business, you probably know that some of the biggest needs those companies have are access to legal advice, how to set up your company, how to create your bylaws correctly, access to HR advice. You don't necessarily know how to hire people or how to put out a job ad, and access to accounting services is how do you run your business. And I will tell you, as a 12-person company and the president of the company and been so for 3 years, I continue to try and figure out every November and December what our tax situation is going to be and relearning everything over again, because the other 11 months of the year I'm spending actually trying to do my job. And so everything that I've learned last December is already gone. And so having access, especially for someone just starting out, to someone who can provide that advice and help me make sure I do it the right way is going to be a critical component. I bring that up to say is that I think there's opportunities to continue to increase entrepreneurial development. One of the upsides of bringing in an older, more affluent, and more educated population is either they may be looking to start a second career or a new business, or maybe they're looking to be an investor in companies, and maybe they've been there and done that, and they don't want to do it themselves, but they're happy to work with someone who has that idea and has that energy. And so there's opportunities, we think, in that regard as well. And then one of the other things that we learned from the demographic analysis is the population here in the county is diversifying, and you're seeing a growth particularly in people of color and immigrants. And the reason why, from an economic development perspective, that's an asset is because national data shows that people of color and immigrant populations are more likely to start their own businesses than indigenous Americans. And so there's an opportunity there that if we could create an environment that is attractive, we can help those households and the new residents of this community to achieve the American dream and help them build and create opportunities that also creates economic development for the community as a whole. The last bit I'm going to bore you with here this morning is we did some real estate analysis. And so we wanted to understand the market, not just from the types of companies that are being here, but the investments that are being made. I don't believe I need to tell you all that the predominant strength in non-residential development has been in logistics. Here in the community, you have a very beneficial incentive structure that makes that very attractive. Not only are we located on 2 major interstates, one of the, maybe the second strongest logistics and goods moving interstate in the country, I-81, and then also obviously 70 that connects me into some major marketplaces, and then over to 95, which is the most used, at least here in the east of the United States. And so it's not terribly surprising that you're seeing substantial interest in that. It's a tremendous location. It's very, very challenging to locate on I-95, and this is definitely a beneficial location to do that type of investment. We haven't seen as much in the other non-residential, the office and the retail, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. From a residential perspective, you are starting to see the change in demand showing interest in diversification of housing. You're not just getting your traditional single-family or estate type of residential development. There's a lot of interest and desire to see different types, higher levels of development intensity, different sizes as you're bringing folks. Retirees don't always want a 3,500 or 4,500 square foot, 5-bedroom home. You're starting to see folks that, younger folks in the professional or in the working age that don't have to go to their office, but they're not looking to buy a house with a large piece of land right now. They're in a part of their life where they're looking more for something that is more turnkey, and then as they evolve, they look for that next level as their station in life changes. And so there's a lot of opportunity, but from the residential side, you're seeing a lot of interest in the typology of the live, work, play kind of environment. And you're going to hear that a lot from me, not just today, but through this process, is market preference, consumer preference is evolving. The impact of the baby boomer generation as they are retiring and looking to downsize and looking to make their lives a little bit easier. And also the Gen Zs and millennials are moving into that more suburban white picket fence strategy a little bit later in life, if at all. And so, and those two are the largest market sectors right now. My generation, the Gen Xers, they're just numerically fewer of us than those. In fact, the most recent study I saw said that the baby boom generation still has slightly more people than the Gen X generation, despite the fact that the baby boom is in the 75 plus, and you're starting to see mortality play into it. It's still larger in terms of the number of people here in the United States. And so that impacts market. But when you're looking at market demand and what even businesses are looking for these days, they're no longer looking for that suburban, isolated, campus-style development. They want to be in a highly walkable, highly amenitized location. And so I bring this up to say is that one of the things from an evolution perspective that we see that not just the county as a jurisdiction, but the county as a community is embracing some of those changes. And I go back to the conversation about how do we become more efficient, maybe with some of the areas that are already disturbed, rather than continually seeing and trying to push out further. Within each of those sectors, from an industrial perspective, you have seen tremendous amount of development. You've seen tremendous amount of absorption. However, development continues to outpace your absorption. Your vacancy in terms of square footage goes up, despite the fact that you have lots of companies coming in here. I mentioned earlier, you have a very, not only is this a highly desirable place to do, like, for example, logistics and warehousing, but you have a very aggressive and successful incentive policy that brings that there. And so people are investing and they're building it with the anticipation of if I build it, they will come. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a bad thing if that continues and you end up overdeveloped. And then now you're seeing internal competition, which will drive down pricing, which will create challenges, and you'll see a lot of, or I shouldn't say a lot of, but you'll start to see an increase in cannibalization. I'm taking your tenant, you're taking my tenant, and you'll just see people moving around trying to get the best deal rather than true economic development. And so that was one of the, from an industrial perspective, those are some of the issues. You know, the other thing is that while logistics does create some tax benefits and some fiscal benefits, it's not the greatest in terms of job creation. And it's not the greatest in terms of land consumption, in terms of efficiency. And so we'll be talking about this in strategies as we move forward to identify and confirm with you all, and then provide some discourse on if that's not what all we want, or exclusively or almost exclusively what we want, what are some of the opportunities that we have to maybe force a greater diversification. From an office perspective, your market here is evolving. The back office piece, where you have had some success in the past, or I should say tremendous success in the past, is changing. With the telecommuting, remote work, the continued increase in technology, I don't need a large facility to put 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people in a call center. They can do that from their home now. And you've seen that here in this community, and you've seen the impact of that already here in the community. Office opportunities here, we believe, are going to be smaller. They're going to be more local or regionally scaled. The idea of a global or a national headquarters being in Hagerstown, at least in the short term, is probably not viable. At least if it were my dollar, as this community, I wouldn't invest it in pursuing those types of opportunities. But there are tremendous opportunities to mine remote work locations of businesses that are operating in Pittsburgh and Baltimore and Washington, D.C. There's opportunities to continue to expand and look at small scale. When I'm talking about 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 square foot users. And so that affects, number one, the type of development that you're going to want to see, but also the environment in which that development wants to be. And I go back to the conversation I mentioned earlier, which is that highly amenitized, live, work, play, town center kind of development. Those types of businesses, the office users are looking for something where their workers can walk outside and within a short walk and a safe walk can hit a number of different amenities, whether it be a grocery store to get lunch, or a pharmacy to get a prescription, or a dry cleaner to get their clothes pressed. That's the kind of environment. The beauty that we have here in Washington County is you already have one environment that very few communities in this region have, which is where we're sitting right now. Downtown Hagerstown, you already have the existing bones of what everyone is trying and spending millions of dollars to recreate. And so there's opportunities here of how we can continue to take advantage of this tremendous asset that will help us from an office recruitment perspective. And finally, retail. Like I mentioned earlier, the world is changed. That has nothing to do with Washington County. More and more people are buying things online. The desire to do brick and mortar is changing. The desire to shop in brick and mortar is changing because of the convenience of what you can get online. But as I mentioned earlier, even regionally, the market is changing as Berkeley County and as Frederick County continue to grow and expand and build their own commercial bases. You're going to see a de-evolution, if you will, of the amount of regional draw that will come here into Washington County. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but the challenge is we're likely going to have some assets that were once viable in the 80s and 90s that are no longer going to be viable moving into the late 2020s and 2030s. And so looking at those as opportunities for reinvestment or infill development or adaptive reuse, I think is going to be something that as a community that we're going to have to take a look at, because the likelihood that we're going to be able to keep everything that we've already built full and vibrant, I believe is going to be extremely challenging, left to its own market devices. So there's going to be some opportunities there. It's not to say that we're not going to have retail here, but I think we're going to have to rethink what that means, and then how do we create, if we do create new retail, how do we create it in a manner that separates us from what's going on rather than being just another outlet mall or another regular mall, is how do we create something that's experiential, or how do we create something that is destination? And I think that's going to be the future of this community as you look to resize your commercial market. I know that's a lot, and there's a whole lot more that we'll talk about in future sessions, but I kind of wanted to give you at least a first level dump of the information that we're collecting. I'm happy to answer if you have any specific questions about those topics, or if you have any other more just fundamental questions about what we're doing. Just to let you know, from a next steps perspective, I'm working with Jonathan to try and identify a time in January to come back here and do another information session with you all and another conversation. And as we continue through this path, Councilman Klein, I 100% support the idea of our engagement together, so that when we come to you with recommendations, that there's already a tremendous understanding and dialogue, so that even if maybe I can't get you to exactly where you want, you'll understand why I got you to where we ended up.
I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
This current review right here, or future, will you be determining how water allocation availability affects economic development from residential to commercial to whatever? Because last I heard, we're at probably 85–90% max, and we need a new water plant. We need a couple miles of 34-inch water lines to do this. Where's that going to come into your report?
So we're doing a what we call an opportunity site analysis, which take into account things like access to infrastructure, and not just water and sewer, but power and fiber, access to transportation, appropriate zoning, and so forth and so on. So we're going to be taking a look at those issues and providing very matter-of-fact recommendations, saying, let's just say, and I don't know the numbers off the top of my head because we haven't gotten that far in the analysis yet, but let's just say you have 2 million gallons a day of capacity left. That can accommodate X amount of development. You want to see X times 3 amount of development. Well, for that to happen, you're going to need to have more capacity, because you can't fit a size 11 foot in a size 5 shoe. And so we will be looking at those issues and providing strategies and recommendations of things that the community can consider as an approach, so that we can have our economic development goals meet our capacity.
That's the number one issue concerning economic development right now, the availability of water into the future.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And that's the type of feedback that I want to hear from you all today, is if there are initial hot button issues that you want to make sure you put on the table for us. That's part of what today is about.
Could I ask a question? I agree with Jeff on that water issue, but how does your analysis look at factors that we don't control? For example, Maryland is rated very poorly as a business-friendly area. Matter of fact, it might be one of the worst of the 50 states. The environment, regulatory environment, the requirements on housing, whether they're energy related or retrofitting buildings so that you get away, they go to all electric, raising costs tremendously for people that own condos or other buildings, okay? Above 30,000 square feet or 25,000 square feet, gonna have to be redone, okay, completely. The regulations that are being, imposing new costs on new homes, you know. When you look at all that, and we're only on 81, 12 miles wide, consumers have a lot of options. They could work here and live in Berkeley or Franklin County or farther away. Same thing with, you know, having a business, okay? So how do you look at that? And the reason I ask is if we could get some insight as to what are the most important things that we might be able to ask our legislators to relook as far as specifics that drive, you know, a negative environment for investors.
So to answer your first question is when we start looking at things like target industries, not just the competitiveness of Washington County, but the competitiveness of Maryland and the realities that we have to operate in as a community based on those requirements are part of our considerations. And frankly, it influences what the types of target industries might be. Mm-hmm. And so whereas without those regulatory requirements in place, industry A may be a strong fit here. The reality is because those regulations are in place, it's not. And so our output, which is recommended industries for your community to consider for recruitment, are going to be influenced by those factors. To answer your second question is we will absolutely can provide and will provide saying here's some of the challenges that you as a community face, both things that you control and things that you don't control. And from those things that you don't control, we can say, you know, lobbying or working with your state legislature for this type of change could help you in this area of economic development. But that's unfortunately where the water's edge is for us, is because, you know, well, number one, we're not lobbyists, and number two is we can identify where those choke points are and give you some ideas of communication to make, but at that point in time, it's, you know, working with groups like Tri-County Council and some of the other entities that are already working on some of those issues will help you as a community engage with them when you're talking about what are the most important issues for us to try and work with the folks in Annapolis. You can put that, you know, and consider that in coordination with your partners as an agenda item.
I have another question. In your future reports to us, we have a comp plan coming out in January. Will you be reviewing our comp plan and trying to balance against how we preserve our ag rural nature in this community with economic development, with water, urban growth area, the historic properties? A lot of property in this county is very historic, related to much of our history. So will you be putting a report out how we balance that type of growth and maintaining our rural nature?
Yes, so from a more higher, we're not going to be looking at it on a property by property basis, but
you'll be looking at our comp plan.
Without question. And so in fact, in that conversation, we're going to say in your comp plan, you identified X, Y, and Z. It has this impact on economic development positively. It has that impact on, and as a result, if, you know, based under what's in the comp plan, you may want to change looking at this as an opportunity as opposed to that as an opportunity. So yes, we don't come in and try and upset the apple cart, right? We don't say, let's just forget everything that we've done and let's move on. We work within the parameters that the community has identified, their preferences, their goals, their hopes, fears, and dreams, and we work within that to try and help you achieve what you as a community want to achieve.
So right up front, you said in the introduction, you talked about the aesthetics and preservation requirements in the county for balance and growth. You talked about the importance of the Ag Center as an important element, the need for housing, but what type of housing, and concentrated housing to some degree, probably, and then growth and jobs, okay. But first and foremost, you addressed sort of that balance, the aesthetics of what Washington County is that makes it an attractive place to live. And so you're going to help us navigate to find that sweet spot.
I am going to identify the information to say, if you, let's take two extremes.
Yeah.
If you don't want to grow another square inch, this is what we think you can do and here are the benefits and the challenges of doing that. You say and I'm making this up for the sake of this conversation. You say we want more job growth. Well, that's going to be very challenging if we don't allow the building of another building here in the community. And I'm being overly dramatic for effect. And then on the flip side of the coin is, let's go. Doors are open, let's do this. Well, here's the implications and the ramifications of those choices. So as we work with you to develop goals, and you say, we want this, we want that, and that's going to be part of our next conversation, by the way. We're going to show you a list of preliminary goals that we're working with the working group actually this afternoon. And then we're going to bring that to you for your review and input and say, all right, if this truly is your goal, and let's say this is your number one goal, well, then here's the reality of what it's going to take for us to get that, and here are the challenges that we face. And then you say, well, you know what, Kyle, I'm not really comfortable with that kind of growth. And I say, I respect that. As a community, you have to make those decisions. Then let's pivot and let's refocus of what that goal needs to be based on the balance, as you said, sir, which is between the economic kind of fiscal financial job piece of it, and then all the other components that you have to consider as a community. My job's easy. I get to wear bifocals, right? I'm only focused on economic development, but I respect and understand that this fits in within a larger paradigm of everything from community engagement to parks and rec to public safety to transportation and all those factors that we have to take into consideration as a consultant, because providing you a strategy that completely ignores the goals and values of the community leaves you with a lovely and a very expensive paperweight.
So you mentioned the working group. Refresh my memory, who's on that working group?
So we have representatives from the City of Hagerstown Economic Development Team. We have a representative from the logistics industry, which I don't know that should I just name them all in public? Hardy Pet Food Stations owner is that representative. We have a representative from the fiber industry, that's Stephen Schutte from Point Broadband. We have a representative from the agriculture industry, not only internally Kelsey, our ag specialist, but we have Janet Stiles Fulton, who owns Shenandoah Jerseys, and she represents the ag community. We have the strategic Chief Strategy Officer of Meritus, Dave Lair. We have a representative from the manufacturing industry, ICO Industries, the roof manufacturer out on ICO Way. We have a representative from the Convention Visitors Bureau, Tiffany Ahalt. And then, without going through the whole list there, Commissioner, I would say that the other strategically identified community players, when I approached Kyle with the working group suggestions that I just initially had about the impactful people in our community, he made the suggestion that we make the working group less chiefs and more workers, you know? And then Kyle pursued individual strategic conversations and meetings with the particular people that you probably are thinking of.
Was there a selection process that you did, or you just went there to representatives in those respective fields?
It came from our department. We made recommendations on people. Kyle asked for specific industry representations and or community representations. So people like GHC were invited because of their impact through GHC.
You mentioned Morris County Convention Business Visitor Center. That's pretty important. I've been a supporter of that tourism, and it's a very good economic engine. So in your report, if they're on that work committee, you'll have some recommendations or suggestions on how to assist them and help us with that.
From a tourism perspective, absolutely.
Tiffany's very impactful to the group, and she's attended every meeting, so we really appreciate their involvement in this planning process.
Jonathan, if I could just say, I have a list of questions. One of my questions was this committee and who picked them and why the commissioners weren't involved. And I don't know if the intent is to be secretive, but when we're not given the list of names of everybody, I'm a little concerned about that. I think the commissioners have a right to know who they're getting recommendations from. And I hope that maybe we, at the very least, get an email of all 15 people.
I certainly will email that to you, yes. They don't always all attend. It's a tough group to get together, so remembering all their names right here is just difficult. I won't have them all.
Sure, I would grant you that, but if we're getting feedback and opinions from anybody in the community, I think we have a right to know whose opinion it is, and just, so maybe we can understand all the connections that are involved, and, just weed out the self-service that may be part of that as well.
I understand.
I'm glad to see that we're working with the city, and I see that was one of my questions. I see in the front of your slide a nice picture of downtown, the square in Hagerstown. That's nice to see it's included. Kyle, you had mentioned, I don't think you meant to exclude, but we have 3 interstates that run through Washington County. Interstate 68 starts or ends, depending on which way you're going.
Yep.
Here in Washington County, I think that's important. I know a lot of people who take advantage of some of the travelers from the college towns that connects to in our community, and natural resources that flow out of some of those states just a little to the west of us. Kind of curious why you classify Frederick as an emerging market. Just, kind of my experience and history here in the county, I know a lot of people that always look to Frederick as kind of they have a larger population than we do, they have a bit more activity than we do. That's just has always been a given for me.
So perhaps the term emerging might be misstated in terms, and maybe better it would be evolving. As Frederick grew up as a suburban area to DC and Baltimore, it's now becoming an entity unto itself, which that hasn't been what it was for a long, long time. And so the way that, to the point that you're making, the way that the market is perceiving Frederick County is changing. And so it's continuing to evolve because it's starting to create or continuing to expand its critical mass. And so what it looks like as a place to locate or do business or live or whatever it is, people's perceptions of that are changing because it's starting to get to a level that it hadn't been in the past. And that growth has been substantial and consistent for a while now.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. And then one other question. Does your firm, do you typically work with counties? Do you work with city municipalities, states? Who are your typical customers? And can you kind of give Washington County is typically referred to as a rural county in the state of Maryland, based on our geography, based on our population, based on other things, our economy. I'm just kind of we're unique, because of that, and I'm just kind of curious. Can you kind of share a mix of some counties, some customers that you've had, and what you've done for them, and how what you might recommend to us down the road would almost certainly be different than maybe a more metropolitan area like Alexandria?
Sure. So RKG has a number of varied business lines. Economic development strategies is one of the avenues in which we work. So I'm just going to focus in on that. And the reason why I am here is that I generally lead our economic development work for RKG. I have 3 other partners, and while they're more than capable of doing this type of work, this is kind of the specialization that I've brought to RKG in my years of being with the company. To that point is for economic development strategies, our clients are mostly cities and counties. So we've worked with Shenandoah County, a little bit further south on I-81. I've worked with Lake County, Illinois, which is the county just north of the city of Chicago. I've worked with communities like Alpharetta, Georgia, which is a city just north of the city of Atlanta in Fulton County. Our experience runs everything from communities that are urban to communities that are rural. I'm working right now concurrently with this with Darlington County, South Carolina, which is a very rural community. Oh, that's right. Thank you for reminding me. We've also worked with the city of Cumberland. We did their economic development plan about 8-9 years ago, and then we did help them do an update about 3 or 4 years ago, I think. And so we've worked here in Western Maryland. The point of all of that, and maybe the intent of your question is that, yes, we identify that every community has its own idiosyncrasies that have to be accounted for. I would respectfully push back on Washington County being classified purely as a rural community. You definitely have components of your community that are rural, but you also have some very legitimate industrial, suburban, and I would argue even urbanization opportunities that are arising because of the changing in the market and the changing in the world. And as the DC, Baltimore, and Pittsburgh economic gravities continue to expand, you're getting swallowed up in that. And so the realities of investing here, doing business here, are changing because those markets are continuing to change. I can't say as an expert in Frederick County, but I would imagine 40, 50 years ago, it didn't look anything like it does today. And why is that? It's because Frederick County finally got absorbed by the growth of the DC and the Baltimore metros and got seen as a viable location because of opportunity, cost, valuation, yada, yada, yada. Well, you're on the cusp of that here, frankly. You're the next stop, if you will, on I-70 heading west. And so while you have tremendous components that are rural and that need to be respected and considered and preserved and celebrated, I think that your market is more complex than just being defined as a single typology of a community.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I bring that up, kind of like Commissioner Klein had mentioned, you know, we have a rural heritage that our community is very proud of, an agricultural industry that we're proud of, and historic buildings and structures all throughout our community that I think may be a difficult spot for you. You know, there's that faction of the community that wants to preserve that, a faction of the community that, you know, understands that may have to go away if a certain business or businesses go in, and, you know, finding that balance. But, you know, at the end of the day, I think a lot of it comes back to what the community wants. I think that's important too. So just respecting that, and, you know, I would urge is, you know, something that's very, very important.
In my close to 25 years of doing this, what I've learned is that it's not an either or situation. It's not growth or preservation. It's not job creation or tax base creation. It's not rural or urban. Both can exist simultaneously if they're done strategically, if they're done well, and you can meet the needs or the desires of different factions of your community. Now, I'm going to push back a little bit saying the challenge is on you, because some people just don't want any change regardless of where it is, and they just want to be very headstrong and say no to everything, period. And that doesn't change the output of my product. That changes how you as a community implement it. And that's the reason why we are very focused, and I mentioned here today, and we're going to talk about in more detail over time, is how do we identify areas that are already disturbed to be able to be more effective and efficient at meeting those needs, so we don't have to push out into areas that have not been disturbed. So for me, one of the primary things you as a community can do is how do we find ways to make the areas that are already developed can accommodate things more efficiently, so they can accommodate more, so that we can mitigate the footprint. And so that maybe instead of expanding the growth boundary, we find ways to be more efficient with the growth boundary that we already have. And that's a conversation we will have. And maybe you say, you know what, Kyle, that's a bridge too far. I don't want 6-story buildings in my community. And I'll say, okay, I respect that and I understand that. But here, once again, I go back to the question that was asked earlier, which is, here's the ramifications if we don't want to go that route. Is if we want to accommodate development, if we want to continue to see fiscal sustainability and fiscal improvement, there has to be some sort of balance. There has to be some level of cooperation and collaboration. You can't be all of one or all of the other and meet all the goals that at least have been told to me so far.
Yeah, being mindful of urban sprawl, I think just.
Listen,
one more thing though, if I could mention, Hagerstown is our city center. It's our county seat. It's obviously an economic driver in Washington County. Our other municipalities, we have 8 other municipalities throughout Washington County, and we're meeting in one municipality tonight that's surrounded by Antietam battlefield, and they love being surrounded by, that nature and, the history of their battlefield. But we have other communities that are striving for economic, successes and, landing different businesses or industries as well. And if we could, put some focus on those outlying communities as well, I think that helps our
I appreciate that, and this is a Washington County Economic Development Strategic Plan, so we are already considering and looking at not just where we're sitting right now in the Hagerstown area, but we are looking at what opportunities are, but in respect to what they want to see for their community, right? Because the goal isn't to change who you are, the goal is to help you get what you want.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Looking forward to hopefully getting together in January and having our next conversation.
Thank you very much.
Next item, contingent approval of design bidding services agreement related to airport terminal expansion project.
Andrew Eshelman, Director of Public Works.
This is a follow-on to the Airport East Terminal Expansion Program. The airport has been awarded the $5.25 million bipartisan infrastructure law program grant. What we're seeking today is a motion to empower me as airport director to sign a services agreement for design and bidding services with ADCI, our airport engineers. It would total $693,877. This is reimbursable under that grant I described at a 95% level. And this would allow us, given the holidays and the schedules, to move forward with the process of design and bidding, given a compressed timeline and schedule. This is contingent upon receipt of the independent fee estimate. By way of update, we did receive that IFE, and that confirmed that this is a very good price ADCI is offering us. And we were just waiting on concurrence back from the FAA on awarding this service. So the signature would happen after receiving that communication back from the FAA.
Motion to approve the recommended.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. 5-0, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Program, better known as MALP, 60/40 match for FY 2026. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Commissioners. As I do every year, I'm bringing forward the 60/40 match MALP request. Each year, the Maryland Ag Land Preservation Foundation asks counties if they want to obligate funds to the 60/40 match portion of their program. This year, we're hoping to do $1.3 million as our 40% local match in order to receive the state's full $2 million match. Of course, the commitment requested today will probably result in roughly $5 million for easement purchases. We don't fully know exactly what the state will have, when they make their offers in the spring, but it's kind of an educated guess there. For clarity's sake, state funding contributions to our ag program result from the following distributions. MALP divides its entire funding in half. The first half goes to what they call a general allotment. And so that general allotment, they split evenly between all Maryland counties that use the MALP program. The second amount is what they use for the 60/40 match, which will be their 60% contribution to our 40%. And that's split up between what the counties put forward individually for their 40% portion. We think this will probably get us at least 5 farms for the next cycle. Values are going up, and so as farm values increase, per acre value increases for easement values. So we're trying to just keep up with essentially the real estate inflation. The Ag Board is endorsed this use. We've also been in contact with Kelsey Mace, our CFO, when coming up with this plan. So the recommended motion would be to approve a $1.3 million commitment from the County Real Estate Transfer Tax Reserve to the 60/40 match component for the FY 26 cycle. Any questions?
If we do that match, what's our total dollar amount?
If we do the match, $1.3 million, the state will match $2 million to that, and then, which would come to a $3.3 million total of just the match portion. Then we would have to factor in what the general allotment would be. That's why we're assuming a roughly, maybe I should turn the button on. There we go. So then it would result in what we're estimating to be about $5 million toward MALP.
For next year?
Yep.
A lot of money. Motion to support.
Second.
Motion and second in support. All in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is establishment of Adna Fulton Forest Mitigation Bank. Travis, good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. So again, this is a request to establish a new forest mitigation bank on property owned by Ad Fulton. These properties are located on alternate 40 near Roxbury Road. They are looking to establish 65.47 acres in a forest bank across 3 different parcels owned by this property owner. The purpose of a forest mitigation bank is to provide off-site mitigation options for development projects that can't do their mitigation on-site. In order to use the bank, they have to first prove that more preferred mitigation techniques are not feasible before dipping into the bank and using those credits. Credits are then purchased from the owner to satisfy those mitigation requirements for the development, and the acreage is then deducted from the overall total until that acreage is eventually exhausted. Article 20 of the Forest Conservation Ordinance defines specific criteria that are targeted for the establishment of new forest mitigation banks. They include the establishment or enhancement of forested buffers adjacent to streams, critical habitat or differing land uses, forested wildlife corridors, forested 100-year floodplains, steep slopes, or enlarging contiguous forest areas. There are 2 types of forest mitigation banks, a planting bank and a retention bank. Here in this case, they are proposing again, 65.47 acre forest retention bank, so saving existing forest. When doing mitigation off-site, they do have to do double the acreage that they are required on-site. So if they had to do 1 acre on-site of mitigation, they would have to put 2 acres under easement in the bank when they actually utilize it. In terms of the specifics of this site, I'll just mention a couple of notable characteristics of it. This would retain a pretty large forested buffer along Antietam Creek, so it would offer some significant water quality benefits. As well, during a 2019 review of a forest stand delineation submitted for these properties, the DNR Wildlife and Heritage Service also did note the potential for the habitat of rare, threatened, or endangered species. So it does have some specific environmental characteristics that would be protected as a part of this bank. So I'll let the applicant elaborate further if they like, but they are seeking a recommendation, an approval for the final establishment of this forest mitigation bank that would then be followed up by County Attorney's Office to draw up the various legal documents.
If they're going to speak, I motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Ready to vote? All in favor by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign, 5-0. Thank you. Merry Christmas. Okay, next item under open session meeting is the bid award, PUR 1715, Cisco Meraki hardware licensing.
Good morning, Commissioners. Brandy Kenton, our Director.
Josh Henry, Chief Technical Officer, Information Systems.
The recommendation I have for you this morning is the bid award 1715 Cisco Meraki hardware and licensing. Move to award the bid for Cisco Meraki hardware and licensing to the responsible bidder, GHA Technologies out of Scottsdale, Arizona, for the lowest bid of $832,395.97. We did accept bids on November 20th. 58 companies downloaded the document. We received 1 bid that was responsive. This was posted on the e-Maryland Marketplace website, the county's website, the local newspaper, and the new online bidding site. This procurement is for network equipment and licensing to replace obsolete network infrastructure throughout the entire county and provide software licensing and support for newly purchased equipment. Funding is available in the amount of $1,234,909.28 in the department's capital improvement plan.
Questions? Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Ready to vote. All in favor by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. 5-0. Thank you. I need a motion to go into closed session to discuss confidential personnel matters, consider a matter that concerns the proposal for a business to remain in the state, and to consult with counsel to obtain legal advice on a legal matter.
Motion to go into closed session.
Second. All in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. 5-0.